Koto, ko Madeline Armstrong Wilcox toku ingoa. I'm the head of programs here at the Neurodiversity in Education project. Really pleased to share with you the summary of our cafe session about seeking neurodivergent perspectives, brought to you by the Building a Neuro-Inclusive School program. We are funded by the Networks of Expertise, thanks to the Ministry of Education. Karakia as we begin. Tu taua mai I runga, tu taua mai I raro, tu taua mai I roto, tu taua mai I waho. Kia tau ai, te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai kia. Welcome everyone to this session. This session is all about how we can listen to our neurodivergent learners and their whānau in a really proactive, respectful, purposeful way, and what the things we do are that help us to do that. In the cafe session with teachers, we talked about the things that people already do, and there was plenty of discussion around those anecdotal conversations and discussions and observations, which is fantastic. Those give you invaluable insights. And what we're going to move through in this session is more strategic and deliberate ways to make sure we are gathering those perspectives and we are making really good use of them. Having said that, part of our ethos at Building a Neuro-Inclusive School is making sure things are easy for teachers and school leaders to do. Rather than complicated and burdensome, we want to support you to gather those voices together in ways that are thoughtful and respectful of difference and accepting of difference and respectful of time and energy and effort. We all know as teachers those things are limited, also for students themselves and their families, and in ways that give us really useful information. We caution against a one and done approach, that, we've had our once every 2 year survey of wellbeing, we've got our perspectives. It's really not sufficient. Your seeking of perspectives can happen often, frequently, informally and formally, but in ways that are easy. So I just wanted also to step back and just think a little about why it's so important that we gather those perspectives. I know many of us have been trained into seeking student voices as something we do, but on a deeper level for neurodivergent learners, neurodivergent families, being listened to, having their lived experience contribute to what happens in school creates a much deeper connection and a sense of belonging. And that is something that our neurodivergent learners often say they are lacking a little bit of in schools, that deeper sense of belonging and connection. So listening to their lived experience that in itself can create better sense of belonging. It can also create those shared understandings. We understand as educators and students understand our perspective as well. It's that two-way street of building those deeper understandings together. It opens the doors for more informed, more targeted, more effective support for our neurodivergent students. And that's the end game. That's the point, right? Is that actually in seeking those perspectives, it's because we want to do better as educators and support our neurodivergent learners more. We also talked about in this session, what else does it create? And some great ideas around sense of community, around safety, psychological and emotional safety of our students as well. On our side, on the side of educators, it takes curiosity from us. We need to be open-minded to seek out those perspectives and really listen to them and listen without judgment and without defensiveness. Sometimes we might not like what we hear. So removing our egos from the equation is really very important, and just to listen to what is being said. It takes some skilled listening as well. And by listening, I mean the way we take in information, not just the literal act of listening. Um, we need to be able to listen for meaning, not just the direct words that are spoken. So that little bit of unpacking of what is actually being said is quite important. But again, from a non-judgmental perspective, not a perspective of, oh, this child is trying to niggle me, or this group of kids just really want to follow their own agenda. Like, remove the judgment, remove the defensiveness, and just be open to the message. We need to be looking for patterns and trends, things that are the same across multiple groups or across time, or things that seem to be emerging. But we also need to be alert to outliers, because there is no singular neurodivergent experience. When we talk about neurodivergence, we are, of course, talking about a wide range of brain-based differences, not a singular thing. And even if we got really categorical about brain-based differences, one person with autism is not the same as the next person with autism. So we need to be alert not just to those things that are in common, but also those outliers, those things that are quite different and quite unique and quite individual. We also need to make a commitment to respond with care and respect to what we have heard, right? It may be at the outset of going out to seek some perspectives, we say to students and to families, we're really interested in what you think about XYZ. We're going to listen carefully with great respect, and we are going to try and respond, try and make some changes that might suit. We can't promise the world, but we can try together now that we know some things. All right, so making that commitment to respond to what you have heard is super important, because if you don't respond, the next time you go and ask, students and families will think, oh, why would I bother investing my time and energy in talking with you if nothing is going to happen because of it, right? Again, we can't promise the world, but we can promise to make some effort to change, or some changes. And we talked about other things that it requires of us as educators. And again, it's that little bit of time, little bit of effort, little bit of work to put in, but aiming to do better. Know better, do better, as they say. Okay. In our cafe session, we had input of some of our young neurodiversity champions, who are a group of young neurodivergent people who we have brought together to be really our guiding voice in everything that we do. So a few reminders from them. If you are seeking the perspectives of neurodivergent students, make it a timely process. So the example given was in a tertiary setting, and equally applicable to the end of high school, that students were invited to give feedback well after the year had got started, actually towards the middle of the year or later in the year, by which time a whole lot of things had happened that didn't work very well, and it's quite hard to untangle those things and unpack those things. So maybe front footing, seeking those perspectives. So instead of reaching out when things are going wrong or in term 3, we actually reach out and seek those perspectives really early on. In the cafe session, teachers were talking about how we can seek perspectives before students enter school, or very early in their school journey, and then continue from there. So being timely is quite important. How you ask for input is super important. The story shared by our champion, who is a dyslexic learner from a dyslexic family, gave the example of being given a quite a long written via email Google form to fill in with lots of written responses from her and her family, and that is just actually too hard. They made a good effort but gave up because the mode of asking did not work for them. So thinking about how you ask, and I'm going to come to that soon, is really important. Coupled with that idea of being timely, ask often. Things change, kids change, families change. We all know this. So without it being really cumbersome, and the idea of like an annual survey is a cumbersome approach, that we actually check in often and perhaps less formally rather than, one really huge feedback seeking event. We need to make a response. As I've said before, there is no point asking for input if you're not going to pay attention to it. And our champion in the cafe session really reiterated that being asked and being heard really contributed to her sense and her family's sense of belonging in that school community, which contributed to her achievement. And I think those two messages are so important, that really close connection between belonging and achievement. Okay, in seeking out the perspectives of our neurodivergent learners and their whānau, it's really important that we figure out what we actually want to know. There's no point going out and saying, tell us about school. I mean, you could do, but the statisticals are garbage in, garbage out. A question that broad and that big, get specific. What do you want to know? But importantly, why do you want to know it? Right? Are you going to do something with it? Then we need to go and ask, and then we need to do something with that information. So here are just a few questions that you might work through in guiding your process of seeking neurodivergent perspectives. What do you want to know? For instance, do you want to know about a subject area? So how's it going from maths for you at the moment? Particularly pertinent for our primary schools where there's lots of curriculum change. We might want to seek learner input into what the impact of that is on them. We might want to know about particular kind of crunch points in school life, like what's assembly like for you? What's it like for you when we come into classrooms at the start of the day? What's it like for you at break time? What's your experience been like of your sensory context, right? So get specific about what do you want to know. Think about who you want to ask. You can take the really individual approach and just kind of shoulder tap kids and have individual conversations with them. But then you might not get that sense of pattern that is actually quite important as well. So it might be that you ask lots of different people. It might be that, for instance, if you're asking about curriculum change, or you're asking perhaps about assessment conditions in your school, that you take a really wide lens and you ask a whole class or a whole cohort, something really simple, really quick. All right. So tying together what you want to know and who you want to know it from is quite important. And just balancing out that individual versus group idea, that we actually need usually more than just one individual to talk to. That bigger picture is important. It may be that we need to really think about that mode. As our champion said, sending a written form to a dyslexic student in a dyslexic family, that mode is not going to work. For young children, sending a form, a written piece of paper to fill in, it's not going to work either. It may be those are through discussions or circle time, or having a Lego session where we're also talking about how we feel about our sensory context. For older students, it might be slightly different. It might be something written in private between one student and a teacher over multiple occasions. All sorts of different ways of gathering that feedback. So get creative and get thinking about who you are asking and what will suit them best. For one of our champions, they are quite opposed to kind of unstructured, unscripted conversation. So being asked in a conversational style or a discussion would feel really threatening and wrong for them, for that particular person. They respond better in writing. So knowing who you're trying to ask, again, can be complicated, but, work that out as part of your process. When do you want to know things? um, get psychic and get ahead of potential issues, right? That school transition early in the year, early in something, when you get the sense that things are maybe not quite right, rather than waiting till all the wheels have fallen off or the end of the year, give me your end of year feedback. Why bother? The year's finished, right? And a little bit and often can be a lot better than kind of once every 2 years in an enormous lump. Before you seek out the perspectives, it's always really wise to work out in advance, what are you going to do with this? Are you prepared to make tiny tweaks? Are you prepared to go back to your teaching team if you're a school leader or an RTLB or a SENCO, for instance, and say, look, we heard ABC, we're suggesting that we do XYZ. Are you going to have that courage to actually take action if action is needed? Think that through in advance, because if that's a no, don't bother with the rest. Here's a few ideas of kind of pulling people together in ways that you can kind of have a ready-made captive audience to work with. So in the secondary school or perhaps intermediate and up context, you might have a student-led neurodiversity club, just like you have maybe a lunchtime chess club or a lunchtime tabletop gaming club or whatever. You might invite students to pull together a neurodiversity club that is student-led, that lets students, hang out together, etc. Captive audience right away to talk to. You might have prefect or student leader or student council roles. Plenty of primary schools also have student councils that are specifically like a specific role that isn't a class representative, that's a neurodiversity representative. So that person might be a really great go-to person who can seek out other voices and feed them back, or can share those voices at that student leadership level. And that can work equally well in primary and secondary contexts. On that note, in our neuro-inclusive school code, you might notice that as at board level, so this is moving beyond students and whānau into school governance, at board level, it's really useful to have a specific neurodivergent voice at board level, or be able to co-opt in a neurodivergent voice into that board, so that at that level, you're also seeking feedback, listening to feedback at all times as a whole school context. Whole class surveys that can be done through Google form if that suits, or through discussion. For our little ones, even having a class discussion where it's stand up if you prefer bright lights, sit down if you prefer dim lights. You can survey at that whole class level. Even with our really young students, that's not a written survey, that's a proactive discussion-based or action-based activity. For older students, a Google form can be useful. As our champion pointed out, not useful if you have kids with dyslexia or families with dyslexia, but it could be that your Google form is an easy read form and the responses are yes, no, maybe, or like it scale of 1 to 5, rather than free text responses, and just take care to word your questions in that easy read way. The other great source of input is other lunchtime clubs that you may already have running at your school. or even groups in your school, like especially in primary school, if you have your class librarians or your green school group or your student leaders who do visits group, or in high schools you might have your chess club or different sports groups or whatever. Any group that kind of naturally brings together groups of kids, you've got a ready-made audience there that you can say, oh, hey, hate to bust in and your time for your library learning, but can I ask 2 quick questions, right? And away you go. So lots of different ways of tapping into things that your school has probably already got going, that you can just draw those neurodivergent voices out of and through. Bearing in mind that when we talk about the gold standard of neuroinclusion, we're actually talking about all brains, not just the differently wired ones. Yes, you really want to hear from the differently wired brains, but bear in mind that all brains exist too. So just singling out your neurodivergent kids will give you some information. But if you actually broaden that out, you'll get richer information still. The same principles apply, obviously, when we are seeking out whānau perspectives as well. We need that mix of formal seeking out perspectives and that informal classroom door situation, that nice mixture of both, working through those same questions. What do you want to know? Who do you want to know it from? How? When? What are you going to do with it? Exactly that same thinking process needs to apply. Being very, very specific about what you would like to know. So many schools we hear from have a really good transition into school pathway where, tell me about what helps your child feel comfortable and tell us about what helps your child, feel really good and learning well. Repeat that over and over and over so that that information builds up over time, and keep that information traveling with the child through school. Invite children into that same sharing also. And I think with seeking out our whānau perspectives, it's really important to take that ethos that we're actually all in this together. We as a school are trying to understand your child and your whānau so that we can benefit your child. Really get together, really push that idea that we're actually all working together for the same outcome here. We're going to talk more specifically about working with whānau in our next cafe session coming up, which will be on Thursday, the 4th of September. And in that session, we'll talk quite specifically about how whānau of neurodivergent learners are likely to be neurodivergent themselves. So that's an interesting little lens that sometimes we need to be aware of and respectful about when we are seeking those whānau perspectives. But all of those same principles apply when we are asking whānau to fill us in on their kids. Right. Most importantly, what are you going to do with that information? Because there is no point asking if you're not going to do something with it. First of all, making sense of the information you have is super important. Working through, taking the time to make sense of what you are seeing, especially if you've got kids who've built Lego and drawn pictures and had really wild, interesting conversations. Capture that information, write it down, photograph it, whatever works best for you, and get a team, right? Don't make it just you, the only holder of the information. Get collaborative about it. Look for patterns. What are kids telling you that's the same? What's consistent here? What might kind of be the same, a trend, a theme, but you're not sure and it's not necessarily consistent? And what are your real outlier points? What are the things that are like, oh, this is a really distinct thing? So sort and sift and sort and sift and go through. Try and draw out those themes. Try and listen for the the oddities, if children are building Lego models, you're going to have to work quite hard to interpret those with kids. Then think through, okay, what does this mean for us in our context? So we've just heard from a school that asked a cohort of year ones and twos about the sensory environment of the classroom, and many, many, many kids said that noise was a major issue. So consider options for that. What are the options? Right. First option, we just teach people to reduce the noise level. Second option, we put on low-level calming music so that kids don't feel the need to get their voice out to compete with other noise, right? Because that's a thing that happens. We try that. Third, we're going to try some ear defenders, some non-functioning headphones that anyone can use, and we're going to set that up really well. So consider options and trial them. Nothing you do needs to be set in concrete, but if you're going to consider some options, try them and try them one at a time. There's no point completely changing absolutely everything all at once. Everyone will be exhausted by that. Try a small thing. See how it goes. Ask, observe the impact. Then try another small thing. See how that goes. Ask, observe, repeat, and just carry on that process of really digging into the perspectives of our neurodivergent kids, listening to them, honouring them, responding to them. Remembering that that's our gold standard. We want to be able to notice all brains, and sometimes we can't notice what we don't know. So we have to ask. We are also supporting all brains and celebrating all of those beautiful differences, because neurodiversity is our norm. All of our brains are different. All of our brains are fantastic and deserve to be celebrated. So as we finish up, take a moment to think through what's one thing you could do next. What's one way you could gather a little bit more of those neurodivergent perspectives to inform what you do, whatever your context is. We really value your feedback. We are funded by the Ministry of Education to support teachers, and we want to know if we're supporting teachers well or not. Let us know your feedback. Grab your phone, click the thing. You can do the survey on your phone in about a minute. We're not asking you to write a novel. We're just asking for your input. It really helps us. You can get in touch with us if your school or your context or your cluster would like further support. You can book various workshops with us. The menu of workshops is all on our website. That I will tell you. It is www.neurodiversity.org.nz/BNS, Building a Neuro Inclusive School. Google us, will come up. We would love to help. And a karakia as we close, ko mutu a mātou mahi mo tēnei wā, manaki tia mai mā katoa, o mātou hoa, o mātou whānau, ao ki te ārangi. Have a fantastic rest of your day, whatever that looks like for you. Thank you for spending time talking about seeking neurodivergent perspectives. See you another time. Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.